client's inspiration piece to our test piece. A commission coming together. Let's check it out. Howdy Howdy, this is Clara Lawrence. I'm over here at Rhonda Coolest's place, RK3 Designs. She has a client that has an inspiration piece, which I showed earlier. And we matched some colors out, tweaked one of the colors a bit, and we're happy where the colors stand right now. And this is a lot about testing and making sure we're going in the right direction. The project for the client is a countertop that's going into the bathroom. The base of it is going to be alcohol-y to give a watercolor type of an effect. And then, of course, covered with epoxy. But in this case, we're going to use some other colorants that I don't normally use and are not very common in alcohol inks. So we're using some of the Alumilite dyes that we've added to alcohol. We're also using Resin art colors, which is kind of a mica powder, and adding that to alcohol as well. And the gold that you saw there was the only alcohol ink we're using, and that's actually Pinata Brass. And it's just got floating metallics in there. The Smoky Ocean and the warm gray you saw there is Alumilite dyes. And Alumilite dyes are super, super concentrated. Those little bottles there, you fill them up mostly with alcohol and put in 2, maybe 4 drops max of the inks, depending on how concentrated you want the inks to be. Too much of it, you'll have a problem with it, your piece drying. Anyway, here's a piece I did earlier for Rhonda, and it shows alcohol inks and also Alumilite dyes and a little bit of that Pinata Brass and under resin. It really does bring out the colors a little bit more, and for some reason this application is a little bit safer for individuals to add some big color into their home because it kind of reminds them of watercolor. And that's kind of how I wrap my brain around it. I'm messing around with watercolors. So with that in mind, watercolors move around very easily with water. That's the liquid that they float across, how you can manipulate them and things like that. But in reverse, this isn't water, this is alcohol inks. So the way you move it around is with alcohol. And I use 91% alcohol, and most of the time I cover a large surface that I'm going to be working in with a layer of alcohol, and this allows when I add the colors to kind of float on the surface a little bit. Now I will give you this much. The Alumilite dyes do have a tendency to punch through and will sometimes attach to the surface of it. So they can stain the surface of it a little bit, so when you go to remove the dyes, you may still get a little bit of color that still remains. So it does react a little bit different than traditional alcohol inks. So I do want to give you a heads up on that part. So add it where you think you're going to add it and start moving it around fairly quickly. Don't leave those drops just sitting there. Otherwise you're going to have these little polka dots in the back of your substrate. So as you see here, I applied a couple lines, immediately started moving it with my really expensive little cheapy travel, you know, hair dryer. Some people use like embossing guns, which I think are similar to heat guns. I don't know if they get up as high. I find that the little hair dryer works just fine for me. It doesn't put as much heat down. It gives enough pressure as far as airflow to manipulate and move the inks around. And if it's too much pressure, you just move the dryer further away. If you need more pressure, you bring it in closer. So pretty simple. When I'm not happy with an area, I simply either add more alcohol or add more color. I will tell you this much, the resin art colors add a little bit of shimmer. It's kind of like playing with mica powders. Well, it's exactly like playing with mica powders. You bring in that element of shimmer to your piece. So you don't get to lose that like what you would do normally with resin. And that part I really, really like. So the Alumilites bring in that nice saturated color, those tints. You get to control the amount of color. The Resin art brings in that shimmer, that extra element of texture that we like. And then of course the elegance of adding the brass brings in that sense of elegance with the gold floating bits. Now, a tip here. What I do is I get one of those little needle applicator bottles. I fill it up about a third of the pinata brass, the rest of it with alcohol, so it dilutes it down a little bit. The brass can take over, just like when you're doing other golds in resin work. Golds can take over, so you got to be mindful of that. A little bit goes a long way, a little bit's elegant. So what I'll do a lot of times is I'll use this bottle with diluted brass in it, and sometimes we'll immediately follow behind it with alcohol, sometimes not. And then immediately start moving it around, and it deposits these little bits or little freckles everywhere of the brass color, and it's really, really pretty. Now the silver will also do the same thing. The pinata gold sometimes just needs a little bit of coaxing and work to be able to do that. The background element, and this is a reason why I usually put in a whole bunch of alcohol in the beginning, is it will leave very, very faint deposits of color in the background. And a lot of times I'll end up moving the color away from the background, go towards more of a focused area, and then move it out and move it back in. But by doing that out and in and out and in a bunch of times, you end up with multiple layers of very, very faint and very, very delicate color in the background and in the foreground. And that complexity really, it just adds to the piece quite a bit. It doesn't look like something simple where somebody threw some color on there. It really does look like a piece of art at that point. So the best way I can describe working with alcohol inks for those that want to start playing around with this is it's a lot like herding sheep. Your alcohol ink is the sheep, your sheepdog is the dryer, and the air pushing the alcohol around or the colorants around, you have control of that with your dryer. So they go away from you when you're pushing on them. You can move them straight back, the back and forth, and holding the dryer for a moment in one location will leave little tiny deposits there. If you don't like an area, add more alcohol. It kind of erases it. Most of the time it'll erase it completely depending on your colors. So play around with this medium. It is forgiving the fact that you can add alcohol to it. Your first couple pieces are going to be a little frustrating. It's just like learning any medium. There is a bit of a learning curve, but that in combination with other elements like this piece here would go really pretty with some kind of very soft, light, breezy marble, or even a really strong, dramatic one. And also, like resin, you can customize the colors to what your customer needs are. So this is bringing it in closer. You'll start seeing some tiny, tiny gold deposits. You'll start seeing some shimmers from the resin art color in there. And then you see light, very delicate, almost like sheer fabric, layers upon layers upon layers of color. And that's just simply moving the colorants back and forth and then leaving deposits. Really can create some nice effects. When you're done with your piece, definitely seal it up with some archival spray. Use a matte finish so it doesn't reactivate the alcohol inks. I had to show you this. So this is the commission piece that Rhonda and I ended up doing, using those colors that I did on the test piece, and I couldn't be more thrilled with this piece. We did do a video on it, but it's on her channel. I'll put a link down in the description below because I have to share because it just turned out phenomenal. And I love working with Rhonda. I encourage you guys to work with other artists. It's amazing what you pick up working with different artists. Rhonda words this very well. I like to be surrounded with people who are way more talented than me. And there's something to that. That means that you have an environment where you're constantly learning and getting inspired and pushing yourself, going out of your comfort zone on a regular basis. So keep that in mind. Thanks for watching, and hit that subscribe button to get notifications on the next video. Check out the links in the description. You'll see the commission piece that Rhonda and I did together, as well as all the links. Later.